Oh, how do I use the slide? Just by, that's a very good point. She's gone. She's left me, I know. Ooh, ooh. All nervous. How do I use this? Welcome everybody to my talk. Okay, fantastic. Before we start, I just want to be certain how to use the slide. Great, amazing.
I'll help with the video when it gets started.
Welcome, welcome. Obviously, I'm a bit nervous, my first time in the FRSA, so thank you all for being here. My style of talking is going to be slightly different, maybe than what you're used to. I know when people talk, they're very straight away put the definitions up, and then they go into kind of quite a fixed trajectory of these concepts and ideas. I'm going to take on a bit of a journey. And part of this journey is for you to unpick these ideas of power, privilege, and biodiversity, and hopefully through the end of it, we will be able to see what the work is and why these points are kind of relevant as well. Okay, so this is the first introduction to me, and this is one of my teachers saying that in high school, I'll be working for Tesco's. That was one of the conversations he had with me, talking about trying to inspire me as a young person, you know, working in Tesco's. So you can kind of see where that fits under in terms of actually one of the concepts. I'm not going to talk about it specifically, but I've been doing this work more recently, May Project Gardens, for over 20 years. And prior to this, I was actually a carer, okay? So I'm very interested in how music and the arts can be used for social change. It's one of the things I've always been fascinated with. And as you can see here, just kind of a little article. This was done by Positive News a couple of years back. And it's really just kind of exploring my work in its different facets, including May Project Gardens as well. All right. So this is May Project Gardens. And I think it's a really interesting, not only because it's my project, but I think it's a really unique proposition. The reason why I think it's really interesting, first and foremost, it's in my home. It's a council house. I live in the suburbs of Malden, and basically I had a background, as I mentioned before, in education. I had a background in music. I've had a background in the third sector, and I've been doing that work for quite some time. But I was kind of getting, I don't know if anyone's felt that way, sometimes you feel a bit disillusioned about your path in life or about where you're going. Obviously no one is, because everyone's like, no. But I personally felt like a bit disillusioned. And my mum passed away in 2005 after me looking after her for many years as a carer, and her name is May. So the name is May Project Gardens, named after her. Another interesting point was in 2006, someone moved in who was a co-founder of the project called Randy, and he kind of just moved in and started growing like loads of stuff, like plants, garlics, onions, and I was just like, this is really interesting. So I was kind of at this point in my life where I was kind of getting a bit disillusioned with the music industry, because at that time I felt it was quite misogynistic, it was quite unhealthy, drinking a lot, going home, drinking lots, coming back out, drinking lots. Misogynistic, quite homophobic, certain scenes, quite divisive, although music's meant to be a really inclusive scene. I didn't really feel that, and I think partly why I felt that because I'm quite a sensitive individual. So some of the lyrics and some of the ways in which events were set up and the way people behaved, I didn't like it. I didn't like it, but that was what I knew. At the same time I was working in the third sector. I thought I was doing amazing work, but what happened was I wasn't getting promotion. I wasn't getting my support. I wasn't getting the accolades that I thought I deserved. Also, one of the things I really hated was this thing where you'd work with a group of people and you'd have funding for 3 years, and you'd work with very vulnerable people. It takes about a year or two to get them on side. Then you do a year and it's over. So you have to start that work all over and over again. And that was really, really frustrating for me. So I was at that crossroads in a moment. At the same time, as I mentioned, I had this amazing gardener called Randy doing stuff in my house, and I was thinking, let's explore the possibilities. So as I said, May Project Gardens, well, it's been running for 12 years and it runs out of my home, and it always has been. And what we do is we reconnect in urban communities with nature, and that's me with a bit of compost in my back garden as well. Okay, so that's actually, see, there you go. That's my hands, that's really is me. So this is the way in which we've worked. And one of the things that's quite unique with us is we use it for personal, social, economic transformation. That's one of the things we've seen within the project. We've seen that people come and basically it's like a metamorphosis, or I call it composting. They start with this almost waste matter, which can be thrown away, but actually if it's used in the right way, it can be used to liberate and convert people in a very inspiring way. So this is why we talk about transformation in terms of how we work as a model. So social, for example, is that people have gone on to do their own projects. Economically, people have gone to do their own jobs out of our project. And personal is that kind of healing. Many people come, we've got like 3 or 4 types of people that come, or 3 kind of key groups that come, and they tend to be people that have experienced mental illness or some kind of illness of some description, so that's more the personal. Then you've got people that kind of come from quite high profile jobs and have worked in the city and stuff, and that's more economic. They're looking for a different way of actually looking at their lives and how that would happen. And then the social, that manifests itself. People have set up projects similar to ours in our local area as well. So that's kind of what we do. The project is set up using the idea of permaculture. And before I go into permaculture, does anyone know about permaculture at all? Great, I can use this thing. Great. Would you like to share a little bit about permaculture with us? Is that possible?
Sure, I'll have a go. I did I've done like a 2-day intro to permaculture, and I'm quite interested in it as a design principle. The best thing there are 2 things that always stick with me about permaculture. One is the idea that it's revolution disguised as gardening.
I know the guy. I know the guy quoted that as well.
So people think it's gardening, but it's not. And the other thing that often sticks with me, the idea of don't just do something, sit there, which seems really counterintuitive. Actually, the value of observation. I mean, there's loads of that. That's one of the principles, isn't it, about observation and interaction. But actually, it's a really holistic set of design principles that you can apply to all living systems, including living systems that are about people.
And a great throw as well. Anyone else want to share anything? No? That was perfect. That was like a perfect segue to what I was going to talk about. Because this is what we found with our work. We found that a lot of permaculture tends to focus on earth care and fair share. But there's an absence, or a bit of absence, with people care. So when Randy came, he was very good at the earth care, and I had a background, as I mentioned before, which was much more about people care. And I was like, oh, amazing. I've been a carer before. My work is actually quite caring in terms of what I do. So that's where we focused in, we zoned in on as a principle. So what we have here is around the outside is the principles. Is that correct? Yep. And inside we have the ethics as well, okay? So these are the 3 kind of foundations that define what permaculture does and is, and what it does. And around the outside we have the actual working principles. And it was really interesting you said about the observation thing, because one of the things that doesn't happen a lot in this, not just in permaculture, but just as a society as a whole, we don't take time to observe. We rush into environments, we rush into situations and say, because we have an understanding or we have knowledge of something, our knowledge is correct. But how do we know that? How do we verify that? How do we kind of make sure that this is true? And what they say is that before you even do a permaculture site or design or create a site, you should actually spend a year just observing the site. The reason why is because of the 4 seasons. That's the reason why, so you get to see the changes. And actually it's fascinating for me, being in this space, doing a lot of my, within May Project Gardens, in my space, seeing the deepening of observation. Like, you know, like I see frogs, I see foxes, I see ants, there's so much happening. And at first, when you look in a garden, it doesn't seem like there's much, but when you really exercise observation, there's such a wealth of stuff you can see. I want to focus on, so I mentioned people care, so that's really about looking after people or caring for each other. You've got two people, so you have to look after yourself before you can care for other people as well. So this kind of principle here as well, working together to look after each other. But I like these two at the top. Use edges and value the marginal, and use and value diversity. And that's been kind of the thrust without us even knowing about permaculture. I didn't know about permaculture when we started doing this work, but it kind of emerged very, very strongly in terms of how we worked. And I think for those who don't know, actually I'll just show you rather than me saying it. There we go, I'll get it up, okay. For those who don't know, use the edges and value the marginal. I love this quote. Don't think you're on the right path or track just because it's a well-beaten path. And that's very much what we've done as a project and how we've worked, to the point where now we're 12 years and actually we're doing quite well, do you know? So this is basically a way in which we work in terms of how we engage. And I think it's really interesting in how in society, we don't value the marginal enough. And the marginal is not just myself, a person of colour, it's people with mental health, dyslexia, anyone that's kind of not fully included in society. There's a real opportunity of learning, there's a real opportunity for knowledge, there's a real opportunity to expand. I really believe that in some senses this is the future. Like, you know, because if you look at how a garden is, if you come to the edges, you'll see the most diversity, you'll see the most action happening. Simple example of that is a forest. As soon as you come to the edge of the forest, you see a different climate change, you'll see different creatures, you'll see fungi, all this kind of stuff happening. It's the same when people have been displaced or been marginalized in society. If they're not fully included, they have to find more ways to innovate. They have to find ways to recreate. They have to find ways to navigate society. And this is why I love this principle. Okay, so as I mentioned, just a couple of things that have kind of emerged out of permaculture. We've kind of then formulated our own value system, and actually I didn't even know, as I said before, wasn't aware about permaculture fully until Randy came. But these are all things that we base our work around, okay? So biodiversity, this is this notion of if you have diverse systems, people, whatever, you have a more resilient system, okay? Collaboration, I think it kind of speaks for itself, yeah? We kind of, the whole idea of actually working together. This, I think, is very interesting in terms of if we look at privilege and if we look at power, because a lot of work around environmentalism and sustainability is not from the grassroots, it's from the top down. So we have a lot of economic input in terms of what sustainability should be, or environmental should be as well, defining what it is. And that concerns me a lot, because I really feel that actually that doesn't reflect the majority of the planet or the people's situations. So if you look at, for example, people across the world, across the globe, people have not got money, they're very resource-led. They have to be. They have to be very innovative in terms of actually how they resource, how they use resources, and how they use money, how they use stuff as well. Value the marginal, I've mentioned already, and people-centric, I've mentioned briefly, and alternative. It's one of the things which may be best described as maybe innovation, being alternative as well, okay? So these are kind of the values that kind of lead us, lead the work that we do, and it's quite challenging, to say the least as well. All right, how are we doing for time? We're doing all right, great. So this is just an example of somebody actually just being really inspired by our work in Africa and just asked for a t-shirt. We were like, wow, we didn't even think that we'd reach that far. So that's him just kind of with his spade doing this lovely project in Gambia. Gentleman just was really fascinated by what we're doing. Just check this out for YouTube, and just was like, oh wow, this is incredible. And so this is basically another example. So we inspired him, and he's inspired a whole community of growers and environmentalists as well. This is in Project in Gambia as well. So I thought it was a nice little photo. this I think really captures, and there's so many layers to this, but I think this is probably one of our finest moments as reflecting biodiversity. You can see within the faces the range of people that we have that work with us. And this was an event at Lush when we had lots of resources, so we managed to bring the full team together. And I think it was a really fascinating day. I love this because you've got this young lady, she's now left, but she photobombed the project, the picture, and she's from Lush. She's a very influential person. She's now left, but she was very inspired. She's the one that helped us get this event. And what this was basically like we had a workshop, which is what the talk is inspired by. And then we also had a performance as well to kind of support that. So one of the things we do a lot of is use arts and creativity to raise awareness and to inform and to spread awareness about the work we do at May Project Gardens. I think it's quite unique. I think it's becoming more present now within the environmental movement, but as I spoke to you earlier, I think we were one of the first organizations or individuals to really make creative arts embedded in the growing movement or the sustainable movement or the environmental movement as well. So this was great. Does anyone have any questions? No? Ooh, no?
Could you give us an example of a creative arts project that you've done?
Yep. You're great, you are. We're working together already. I'm like, that's perfect. All right, so so I mentioned the marginal. I talked a lot about people being on the margins, but it's our perception of how we work with the margin. So one of the things we say in permaculture is the problem is the solution. So this is my solution, okay? And this is called Hip Hop Garden. Now people are like, hip hop? I'm not into hip hop, that's misogynistic, da 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 da. That's not actually the true origins of what hip hop is. Hip hop grew out of an environment of oppression, of an environment of mass racism, mass unemployment, all these kind of things. And what happened was people in the local community just wanted to change their community. They want to change how they're seen and how they see the environment. And hip hop did that. So it came through a lot of the dancing, b-boying, breaking as you call it today as well. It came through a lot of the MCing, MCing, basically rhyming, rapping. What I like about hip hop, it's not just a music form. Everyone thinks hip hop just music, but actually it's a culture. And more recently, it's developed, it's had 5 key elements in hip hop. So they're rapping, DJing, MCing, graffiti, and entrepreneurism. But more recently, it's expanded to embrace wellness and well-being. So there's definitely a shift in terms of actually understanding sustainability and environmental issues. And this is what we're working on. We didn't know this at the time, but I was like, is it possible to merge these two? So that's kind of my background in hip hop, but then the garden was like, okay, well, how are you gonna bring these two worlds together? And what was really interesting for me, doing a lot of observation, I saw a lot of similarities between hip hop and the garden. And I was thinking, this is really interesting. So one example of this is the use of a circle, okay? Or what we call in hip hop, a cipher, all right? Whenever you see artists or MCs particular, when they actually want to collaborate, they form a cipher. Now, whenever you see nature, you'll see circles all the time. You'll see the sun, the moon, you'll see the herb spiral. You'll see circles all the time. And so there was a lot of parallels I started to look at. I was also, that concept of valuing the marginal in permaculture, well, hip hop was, when it first came out, the marginal. Everyone was like, this is demon music, this is horrible, da 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 da. But yet now it's the largest youth movement in the world. It's the largest one. So for me to try to inform people about gardening or environmental issues, what could I use? Well, why not use the largest youth culture in the world? The one that, whether we like hip hop or not, we know about it. I've traveled to many places across the globe, and I've gone there, and I don't speak a word of English, but the pants are sagging, the cap's backwards, they're walking with a little lean, and they're like, and I'm like, wow, this is the power of hip hop. So taking this idea of this concept of hip hop being able to transform people and environments, imagine if we could do that with a garden or environmentalism, using that hip hop energy, that kind of culture to inform about environmentalism, because actually environmentalism, gardening, is one of the most important things, one of the most challenging problems we've faced as a society. And if you look, these are like two building, like two kind of like estates. And actually, we're living in a time where urbanization is becoming more and more prevalent. So these issues of obesity, these issues of loneliness, these issues of isolation, the issues of resources are going to become more and more prevalent. So I do feel like it's not about me trying to go, let's walk into the fields happily, go and walk in the mountains, without understanding actually we do live in an urban environment, and how can we basically work with that tension. So this is what hip hop gardening is really about, kind of working with the tensions between hip hop and gardening. Some people were like, gardening? No way, I don't want to do, no. They absolutely hate it. So prior to me doing hip hop garden, these are key elements that I've taken out of hip hop to inform the project, or not just me. This is a really beautiful piece of art, and what's beautiful I like about this, the designer actually went into the garden and took all these elements from the garden. You see the bumblebee, which I've been sometimes caught because of my behavior, just rushing around doing loads of stuff. I think we've all been there. I think we can recognize that mode. The hands didn't go into the logo, but the hands represent the collaborative working together. You know, it could be black and white, it could be male and female, it could be gay and straight, it could be whatever it could be, but it's just recognizing difference, and actually the difference actually can work together to support each other as well. Again, in the center you have the circle again with fear of a green planet. There's me hiding in the midst of this, in the midst of the garden as well, doing that. And this is a really interesting, this little bird here, this little robin. It's a really fascinating thing, because I don't know if you're into spirituality or you belief system. He didn't know that the robin to me symbolizes my mum's spiritual bird. And when she passed, there was loads of robins that came into the garden, so I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the robin, this is like my mum's spiritual bird. And he didn't know, but he put it in all the designs without him even knowing that this is what the robin meant. Like every single design, like even a t-shirt you can see, he put the robin in it, and he didn't even know. So there's definitely a kind of a spiritual, whatever you want to call it, input into the work we do. As you can see, I like the color green. I think Fear of a Green Planet, it's appropriate to do it. And I don't know if you can see, but all my jewelry, the bling, that is, you see a lot in hip hop, which everyone seems to associate with hip hop only as being, it's all recycled, upcycled. Okay, all made out of Coke cans, recycled ring pulls, all this kind of stuff as well. It's very important to see me, at a gig, festival, whatever, performing, that I'm seen to be fully immersed in this culture, okay? But bringing a green element to it, all right? This is, someone's called it the kiss of death, but he's going to be Prime Minister. I'm going to bring this picture up to him again. I'm going to be like, you know what? Remember me. Do you know what I mean? But I put it on there because I just wanted to show, kind of referring back to the influence and power, how far reaching we are as an organisation. This is my garden. This is where it all happens. But yet we've managed to connect with someone like Boris, and he's not the first. That if you go to our YouTube, you can see Sadiq's actually rapping one of my tracks. Do you know what I mean? He's actually planting more trees. He's rapping it as well. So this is the garden as well. So this is where I do a lot of like the laboratory work figuring out stuff, processing, like, you know, sometimes life is quite busy, this urban life, like, gotta be there, gotta be meetings, timing, so much to do. And I really like just being in the garden. I still do it like at least once or twice a week, just immersing myself back in the space.
Can I ask about the garden?
Yeah, of course you can.
You said it's a garden in your home.
Yeah.
And I just wondered, is it all like a private garden, or is it a communal garden space?
It's a communal garden.
Okay.
And so one of the offers that we did and made us quite unique as well is that we had open days for anybody to come in the community, no charge. And that has been operating for the last 12 years. So when Randy was around, we'd get between like 6 or 12 volunteers a week, maybe up to 20 in a week. It's a lot less now. The reason being is that we've got a lot more work we do off-site. So for our programs like Hip Hop Garden, for example, they still come to the site, but people are saying, okay, can you program this project in our youth club or education centre or whatever it may be as well. So it just means that sometimes it's difficult. But with that said, the latest Hip Hop Garden project, we are actually working with young refugees who come to the garden as well. And it's really interesting for them because it's a safe space. It's a comfortable space. And there's a lot of, I don't know how much you know about the experience of refugees, but there's a lot of trauma. And actually one of the things I haven't gone into, but it's funny because this space brings out the best and worst in people. Because when you're busy and you've got all these kind of things that allow you to wear masks almost in a sense, like you're busy, you're keeping busy. But when you have silence and stillness, stuff that maybe you never even considered comes up. Maybe trauma, maybe fear, insecurities. And so this happens a lot in the space. And so my job is really to hold that. It's a really kind of, people kind of underplay how delicate the role of a gardener in this space is. So you're doing a bit of counselling, you're doing a bit of support, you're doing a bit of peer mentoring, you're doing a bit of, it's quite a varied role. And we've always struggled someone to kind of come and actually replace. Because also at times it's very isolating. When it's a rainy day and it's winter, garden does, I guess, like, come on, we've got work to do. So this is it. The garden is basically used permaculture principles. So within the space here, you can see a herb spiral. There's beds all around. All the beds are all recycled, upcycled. Everything's repurposed as well. We have 2 ponds. Cherry tree, we've now got an orchard now. This is a massive apple tree that was here before we started it. There's green architecture. There's a cob oven. There's a polytunnel. There's quite a lot. And what this is basically just, maybe people don't have this space, maybe have a space this big, but we're just showing what's possible. If I can do this with my council house with very little resources, in fact none, it was all volunteer led, then imagine if we had a lot of resources, what we could do. We could do a lot. So this is really what we're trying to consider here as well. Do you have any more questions about the garden? Oh, great. Oh, hands are up. Yay! I love the chucking thing.
Have you ever had any challenges from the neighbours or anything like that? Have you ever had any problems with opening up the space?
Actually, I have to say the neighbours are actually quite cool. I think on one side of me, we had a very, it was funny, we had a very aspiring couple. They were builders. And it was, people used to come and look out my window and look at their garden and look at mine and be like, look at the contrast. But I've always said I don't judge, because if they're not judging what I'm doing, I can't judge on what they're doing as well. We have had undercover police come. We've had that, and I've known they were. Yeah, it's very interesting. Let's be honest, I live in the suburbs. Black guy walking around, you know, the suburbs with lots of green stuff. You can imagine what their assumption is. I don't know who reported or whatever said about it, but we've had a couple of people that come as well. On the other side of me is a slightly elderly lady, and my way of kind of keeping her sweet is by giving her produce all the time. So I just give her like fresh greens. Like even yesterday I gave her a sack of stuff and she's happy. There are times when, for example, when we have the young people come in, it does get noisy, but we don't do it every week. So we kind of like, for example, we have had at one point, we've had 60 people on site in this little garden. It's crazy. I don't know how we did it. It was insane. I don't know what we were thinking at the time. But because most people are working, we operate in the daytime. So from that point of view, it actually kind of works out really well, you know, so we don't really kind of affect the neighbours too much. You had one.
When you've very first started, how did you find those initial volunteers?
That was really cool because obviously I had a big network in the charitable sector of my work, doing work for various organisations, and also the music industry. Like I was a bit of a laddish kind of, yeah. I was a real party goer. I still bring some of that energy, the bumblebee energy, to those spaces. So that's how the volunteers came through those two networks. Randy was much more focused on actually the earth care, and I was really like, oh wow, you need to come and see this. And actually word spread really quickly. And actually, as I said before, we had many times where it was like we'd have like 20 people on site, just like almost like a party in some senses. Actually, yeah, almost like a party, yeah, when I think about it. So that's kind of how we got the volunteers through that. You had one as well? No? Good, all right, cool. How are we doing for time?
20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay. So let's have a bit of fun now. So rather than me talking about Hip Hop Garden, I think this is the best, if we can make it work, the best example of what Hip Hop Garden does. Now, this is working in a housing estate in Lambeth, Brixton, which is the 9th most deprived ward in the UK, not just London, in the UK. It has massive issues of police overrepresentation, violence, gang violence, etc., etc. There's a lot of issues. Yay, we got it. So, yeah, please go for it.
Not only veg is nice, some fruits you can eat with rice.
So, we're back in Marcus Lipton, and gentlemen, your name, sir? Joel, fantastic. And what have you been doing in the Hip Hop Garden project? What have you been doing so far? Okay. Thank you very much. All right, so just a word of caution. We have some issues with the young people, so if you've got this film, don't share it too much. Keep it with your colleagues. The reason why, is the next slide. This is what we're faced with at the moment. Yeah, and I don't write this stuff, but you can see young black people feel marginalised. Value the marginal, the thing I was talking about. We've gone in there, and over the course of the 2-3 years, we've had massive gains. The young person you saw in there gave up meat and was like a Morley's like king. And actually, by the end of the project, was like, okay, I'm not going to eat meat no more. When we were commissioned to do this project, Hip Hop Garden, this is the first commission that we asked to do, we were approached to actually grow food with these young people, and we were like, they're not going to grow food. They're not going to grow food like that. So, okay, the observation thing, sit down, we just spent time in a youth club. Where are they frequenting? Any ideas? Any ideas? Want to guess? Well, go for it. Say what's on your mind. Go for it. I said, any ideas where the young people mainly frequenting within the youth club? Any ideas?
Within the youth club.
Yeah. Where a lot of the activity was taking place. No? No?
Like, what areas are in the youth club?
So you've got a gym, you've got a pool table, you've got a games room, you've got a studio, you've got a kitchen, you've got a garden, you've got an outside football pitch. The kitchen. They're hungry. Didn't have a decent meal. So this is where we started. We were like, oh wow, like actually it's not about the growing. Actually what we saw was actually there's a real need for them to eat some really healthy food. Every time we go down there, they cook. That's when a lot of the young people will converge. So we were like, that's where we're gonna start. So what we started doing is actually started cooking with them some really healthy food, mainly plant-based vegan food. And of course you can imagine that uproar when it was, we're not eating this, we're not eating that. So we're like, okay, fine. So we cook a meat version and then we cooked the plant version the following week, and they'd be like, it's actually all right. But you know, they have got to have their, kudos. They've got to keep themselves quite, cool. They couldn't be the first ones to admit that they really like the plant-based food. So we did this over a series of weeks and months to the point where we're like, they're really enjoying it. They started to cook with us. They started to actually make some of these meals. One of their favorite ones was sweet potato fries and mushroom burgers. They love this dish. And with Hip Hop Garden, what we did, I haven't gone into it, but there's kind of like 5 kind of key modules. So there's well-being, which is like sport, fitness, that kind of stuff as well. Anything to do with well-being. We've done more recently, we've done yoga and gong. They love the gong stuff. I can't believe it. Like I'm like, yeah, it's incredible. Like I'm just like, gong? What? But they really like it. I think it gives them a sense of peace. And same with yoga. In their kind of chaotic environments where there's a lot going on, I think these 2 things really work really well. We have an event, we organise an event, which is our event that we have. Actually, it's this Saturday, if anyone's listening. We have an event in Cafe Cairo. The reason why we have an event, we get them to organise an event, is because it's about team working, how they work together as a team, and actually recognising their skill sets as well. So we do that as well. We have employment and entrepreneurism. And that's really about, so taking these skills, if anyone knows the area of Brixton or where they're from, Loughborough Junction, it's becoming quite gentrified. If you go into the market, for example, you're just seeing purely food spaces. So we're like, well, what do you like about Brixton? We like this, we like that. Do you want to make money? Yeah, we love money. Yeah, you're here. Further on, I should have played it more. But it's like, what's the best thing you learned about a project? Money. So, okay, we need to tap into that. We have to tap into that entrepreneurial spirit. So we said to them, do you want to do a pop-up cafe? Of course they did. Jumped at the chance. It was absolute chaos. But they did it, and they did really, really well. They even made a bit of money as well. Like we had these like young, we called them the Snow White and the Nine Dwarfs or something like that. Do you know what I mean? It was just chaos. Someone was eating the produce behind the scenes. They were getting the orders wrong, this, that, but they pulled it off and they made some money and had a great time. And this is kind of what we do Hip Hop Garden. We make it accessible from their point of view. We don't try and go in, as I said before, the observation, that's the first thing we did. We looked at where the needs are, where their interests are, and then we align ourselves to it. Also, hip hop. We look at hip hop, so all the elements of that. So you heard the music. This is more grime. The style that you listen to is more grime, it's more contemporary. But the ethos is the same. It's really a youth-driven culture. So we kind of tap into that, and we were like, oh, do you want to make some tracks? We're going to make a track about, why don't you make it about food? You've been doing it every week. Of course! Boom, they were off. They did it. We can't release that video because there's issues with concerns about how they perceive themselves. There's issues with parental rights, and it's quite disappointing for us that we put all these resources and energy in and we can't take this to the fullest extent. But these are challenges we're faced with. So this is kind of why the work takes a bit longer. The full Hip Hop Garden took 4 years to get fully funded, and I didn't mention 9 years of May Project Garden was self-funded. We deliberately didn't go for funding, one, because I discovered more recently I'm dyslexic, but also my experience of relying on funding or certain types of funding means you create dependency. And we wanted to use the hip hop energy and the hip hop culture to say, actually, we don't need to rely on that as the only way to provide success for young people. I love this. This is so cool.
I was going to ask this earlier, but so how, can you say a bit more about how you're funded now?
Yeah, so now we have a much more diverse mix of funding, and what we're trying to really move towards is much more partnerships and philanthropic funding and sponsorships as a way we move in. So we've got a mixture. We got, for the latest hip hop garden course, we got money from Choose Love Help Refugees, and that was specifically to focus on using the hip hop garden project to help refugees, and that was unrestricted, and that's what we need. We need to be able to do, it's not, I think there's this kind of conversation about funding where people say, oh, but you know, you need to be accountability. We've got 12 years of accountability. We've got a track record, like we've proven ourselves. So then people say, but you need to have evaluations, this, that. I understand all of that, but actually sometimes there's a small grassroots organization that detracts from the ability to deliver the work that we do. So we've always been very aware of that. So we do have a bit of unrestricted. We've got a few grants coming now, and we do get individual donors as well. So if you know of anybody or individuals or organizations that would be interested in this work, please put them in contact. It's so important because we do the work. This has stopped, this project has stopped. Because for us to go back in there with the what's needed, they don't just need Hip Hop Garden, they need some extra support, emotionally, well-being, you know, trauma. They say that the equivalent of, I think they say the equivalent of the experience when you see someone stabbed or something like that, it's like coming home from a war. Do you know what I mean? It's the trauma that they experience coming home. And these young people are literally in a war zone, unfortunately. But yet you've seen the beauty of what they can do if they're given the right support and given the right help as well. So this is the head of the youth centre. Great guy, struggling, trying to keep, we know austerity's kicked in. We know that, again, if you go to our YouTube, you'll see a documentary about youth projects, and just the impact, like that actually young woman says, well, there's going to be more buildings, that means there can be more young people. Well, where are the young people going to go? So why are we closing the young clubs? She says this in the video. So this is an ongoing problem, and it's almost like May Project Gardens has kind of filled this void of a bit of mental health, the arts, and youth provision as well. Like we've kind of, since austerity's kicked in, we've kind of come in, and actually we're busier than ever. Actually, we're struggling, we're trying to build capacity. Fortunately enough, we've got a brilliant director called Mona Bani, who is, you know, without her, like, she's not here today, but got to give her full credit, because without her, her skill set is phenomenal, and she drives a lot of the stuff, not just delivery, but also behind the scenes, financial, communication, etc., etc., etc. And same formally before that, we have a non-executive now called Zaira Rasul. Those two came and really brought a bit more structure to the organisation. Actually, the time when we started looking at funding was a time when we became formalised. We became formalised in 2015 and became a kick. Before that, we were completely unconstituted. We were completely organic. Some would say slightly rebellious. But it was really important for us because actually, as the saying I said earlier, when you've planted your roots deep, you don't fear the wind. And what that means is that when you've done, for us, when we've done the work, which we've done, we don't have to worry about where money's coming from per se, or who's gonna basically report upon us or give us support. It will come, but we have to just keep doing the delivery, and that's what's been happening as well. I think I've kind of covered most things. I don't know, I think I have, yep. Yeah, so I wanted to do this at the end because I felt like, in fact, I'm not even gonna do this. I just feel like it's so typical, but is there anything that you'd like to ask me or find out a little bit more about the project or the work that I do? Good opportunity. We're good? Yeah. Ooh, I love Friday. I like this.
Has there been a particular highlight for you, like, or any particular moments where you've just been like, yeah, this is all worth it?
There are so many. There are so many. I think one of the really beautiful times is when we literally hijacked the mayor, Sadiq Khan. We won an award. We won an award for Hip Hop Garden when we were first starting it, and we won the award the first year. We were invited back to perform the following year as part of a kind of ongoing tribute to the work we did. And I didn't tell them, but I was like, I didn't tell anyone actually. I just said, just follow me, follow me, follow me. So I had my little friend who was who was one of my young artists. She was like 13 at the time, who used to rap with me on stage, and she's amazing, amazing. And I was like, just follow me. And we were like, did the track, and we were like, yeah, everyone, do you like it? Like, yeah. But we're like, something's wrong. We're missing a person. And we were like, who? And then someone said, the mayor! And we were like, called the mayor up. He's a tooting boy. He had to come up. He couldn't back down. But you could see all the staff were just panicking, like, what's going on? Like, do you know what I mean? He did a good job. You know what I mean? It's a YouTube of him clip of him performing one of my tracks, Plant More Trees. So that was definitely, but the highlights, I think I talked about this before. You get so many highs, but so many lows in this work. And I think that I try to understand it through the lens again of nature and call it seasons. So wintertime is the lows, cold, depressive, summertime are the highs. But you know what? They all make, without the wintertime, this apple couldn't be produced because it needs the wintertime to remove bacteria so that it can produce pollen, whatever, you know. So it's all a process, okay? And I think very much we're living in a time at the moment where people don't want to deal with the darkness and happiness. Everyone wants to talk about the great stuff. But actually, I really believe that there's much more to be learned from the shadow, the dark stuff, the dark places, the darkness, as opposed to the great moments as well. But not to say I haven't had a great time. So yeah. Question?
I guess my question leads on from that, which is, what are some of like the hardest things that you've had to overcome while growing this project?
I think managing is always a challenge. I'm 45 now, and I only discovered I was dyslexic about 2 years ago. So I've been kind of navigating the world without knowing. I knew something was wrong. I definitely knew. My communication, the way I am. I've had a lot of tense relationships, work, personal, in my life. I didn't really know why, but I knew something wasn't quite right. And actually, when I found out I was dyslexic, I was like, I played back some of those moments and I was like, that's what happened. I wasn't able to communicate effectively in that situation. I wasn't clear in that situation. I've got better at it. I'm not perfect at it. I struggle with, as you know, I struggle with emails. I struggle with lots of text and lots of information. I struggle with orientation. So I arrived and because I got in a bit of a state because I was a bit late, I started going, oh. And I went around in circles basically, and I knew where the place was. I've been there so many times and I was like, but those are kind of things that happen quite constantly. So the garden really helps me just balance me off, just makes me balance, makes me calm, it also makes me feel included. Like I don't feel like, because I get like directions wrong, like I'm an idiot. Like I'm not great at that stuff, but I'm amazing at other stuff. You know, like it's like a spike, they call it like a spike, go for it. Oh, thank you. But it is, and I think this is coming back to the notion of the marginal. There are some things when you have ADHD, whatever it may be, you're perceived as straight away stupid. If you're a person of colour, okay, yeah, if you're a woman, like we looked at the gender pay cap, it's still to this day, it's there. Like, but actually, these are opportunities for us to learn and to improve society. A real opportunity, I really feel, and I think I'm testimony of that, you know, without resources, without money, with dyslexia, without coming from a working class background, being a carer for 20, the list is endless. Statistically, I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing, but we've done it and we've excelled and we've proved it, so it's possible. So I think this is really, really important. Yeah.
So you mentioned you were self-funded for the first 4 years.
Yeah. 9 years.
9 years.
Yeah.
How, in practice, did you manage that?
So using a lot of my DJing, you know, using a lot of my music industry, like doing lots of gigs and, you know, just performances was really useful. Also, resource-led, keeping the costs down low. Like, so that's why we work from my home. It means I can reduce the travel time. I can reduce meetings. Whenever we have meetings, we're like, have a meeting in the garden. Like, big companies will come to us and have meetings in the garden, and they're like, at first they're like, oh. But then when they come, it changes that power. So I talked about power, we're getting into it a bit. It changes that power dynamic. Like, when you're a big organization, we're coming to you, well, we're coming to you in an environment that you're comfortable in. Actually, step out of your environment. Come to an environment what you're not used to, maybe, and different things will happen, different conversations and different experiences and different relationships will be formed. And that's how Lush became such a great partnership. They came to the garden, they still use it for training, they do it for training, they come and have meetings there. It's really good because it just provides a space that's safe, it's neutral, and it's just nice, good food as well. Good for time? Oh, that went so quick. Thank you so much. And I can give you my details on contacts if you want. If you want to keep in contact in any way, please do. And thank you for your time. Thank you.